She was young, blonde, and beautiful, and she carried cash for drug lords. She got away with it and made good money to boot until her cohort and one-time lover turned her in. Now, Piper Kerman is something of a household name thanks to her book, Orange is the New Black, which is now a hit show on Netflix. A vividly gritty look at the years she spent behind bars, as this clip shows.
I wrote a poem. You want to hear?
You know, that's fine. Before I met you, the sun was like a yellow grape. But now it looked like fire in the sky. Why? Because you light a fire inside me.
Okay, that is Piper Kerman, played by the actress Taylor Schilling, being chased by her self-proclaimed prison wife. Joining me now is Piper Kerman.
Hi, Emily.
I read the book, and I manically watched, I should say, 4 or 5 episodes of Orange is the New Black, because I had just figured out how to use Netflix. But I found that the series is much more highly sexually charged than your book was, which really wasn't at all.
That is true. The book is pretty chaste in comparison with the Netflix series. Jenji Kohan is a television creator and the creator of the show. And I think anyone who watched Weeds, which was her very successful series for 8 years, knows that Jenji is very interested in women's sexuality, so that's front and center in the show.
Well, was there some of that there? There must have been some. I mean, this was an episode where somebody latches onto you and as if you are her wife in prison. Was there some of that? Oh,
absolutely. You know, prisoners have relationships of all sorts behind bars, even though it's completely against the rules. Human beings need contact and love, even in a setting where it's not supposed to exist. The book is a reflection of my own experience, and for me, that was a year of complete celibacy. So, but the show is very different, and the
opening scene is there's this oral sex, and I'm thinking, I don't know, did you witness that kind of stuff?
I witnessed all kinds of things when I was incarcerated, and definitely, women's sexuality is expressed in a lot of different ways, and sometimes that's very private. There's certainly no privacy in prison, so anything that's going to happen is probably going to happen with an audience.
There's another clip we're about to show that kind of addresses the whole issue of rules inside the prison. I mean, you're so cut off from the world, as everybody understands that, but then you enter this world where there's a whole set of other rules, and here's a little bit of that.
Might not look like it, but there's rules in this place. The most important of which is the second you're perceived as weak, you already are.
Now, that's something that you actually addressed in your book.
I always say that there are prison rules, the official rules of the institution, which are in the handbook and are, in theory, enforced by the staff. And then there are also prisoner rules, which are the rules, the informal, social rules that prisoners create for themselves to establish a kind of a community behind bars. And it's strange to think of life behind prison as communal or community in some way, but that's exactly what exists behind the walls of a prison or a jail. And so, those prisoner rules, like what's an acceptable question to ask or not ask, or, so-and-so always sits in that seat on movie night, so you better not sit there. Those are things you have to figure out and pick up on pretty quickly, and the learning curve is very steep on both fronts, the prison rules and the prisoner rules.
What about the issue of being weak or being perceived as weak? Are people picked on if they are?
I did not really see physical violence while I was incarcerated. I spent 13 months in prison. I spent time in 3 different prisons. Not just in Danbury, Connecticut, and I never saw physical violence. I saw conflicts, of course. Prison is a place of scarcity by design, and so that always gives rise to conflict. But women are almost never incarcerated for crimes of violence, and they are unlikely to resort to violence while they're incarcerated. There may be fights, there may be manipulation, but and those things are sometimes frightening. You can be scared without being scared of being physically hurt. But, those things are a little different than what people associate with men's prisons.
One of the things that you address in the book, and you're now kind of an advocate for it, is this whole idea of who gets sent to prison. For what reason and for how long? Because there is such disparity. We see that across the spectrum in the legal system everywhere, but in a women's prison, a lot of it is drug-related, a lot of it is women doing things for men that get them in trouble, but address the disparity. Why does that happen?
Well, first of all, our prison system in this country has grown exponentially. So, in 1980, there were 500,000 people in prison in the U.S., and now there are more than 2.3 million, which is an unbelievably staggering growth. And that's for really three reasons. We put people in prison who we never would have put in prison before. For example, women who are low-level, nonviolent drug offenders. And sometimes we put those folks in prison for really long periods of time. 10 ounces of crack cocaine will get you a 10-year minimum sentence. So that seems kind of crazy. And that accounts for a lot of growth of the prison system, and definitely a lot of growth in women's incarceration. And women's incarceration has grown by 800% in the last 30 years, which is unacceptable. The other reason for that growth is that we send people to prison for much longer sentences, like that 10-year minimum sentence for 10 ounces of crack cocaine. And then we send people back to prison much more quickly than we used to, so probation or parole revocations. And those three things add up to this enormous, enormous prison population, and that's part of the reason that women are the fastest growing segment of the prison population.
One of the things about the series, and of course, you had a lot of humor in your book, too, which was, I appreciated that, because it was a grim situation, to say the least. I mean, as you say frequently, prison is horrible. But the series addressed it, too. I think the series does a good job, if I can say that, of kind of meshing the book with what they're trying to do, which is a lot sexier. But one of the clips I'm about to show also sort of addresses the humor and how you respond to it when you were first sent there.
So this is my last post as a free woman.
What you gonna write?
Hey, oh no. You cannot have a phone in here. This is a federal facility. You have to take that out.
Oh, can I? Am I allowed to go out?
He can take it out.
So no phone.
You knew that.
First of all, as I recall, they didn't let Larry come in with you, did they?
That's the lobby of the prison.
Did
yeah.
they let him come in?
He was allowed to come in. When I self-surrendered, I turned myself in to begin serving my sentence, which, is a privilege generally only, sort of upper class, upper middle class prisoners who, have the right to counsel. And I mean, everyone in theory has the right to counsel, but access to counsel is a different thing. So, you turn yourself in, and a family member or a group of family members can bring you, and that's a very tough separation. I watched that scene, and it is played for humor, even though it's a terrifying moment. But, the sort of that blitheness that Taylor Schilling conveys, that sort of like she has no idea what she's in for. That humor that you mention is really important because the humor is part of what makes you human, and it's really essential for folks who are incarcerated to be able to draw down on that, because there are definitely situations in prison where if you didn't laugh, you would cry. So I do think that in the book, and certainly in the show as well, that is actually an accurate reflection of, how we humanize ourselves in a setting, in an institution which really wants to take away your humanity. And I do think that the thing that is most provocative about the show is not the sexual content, but the way that they ride that razor's edge between humor and also really serious themes.
Are you happy with the series, by the way?
I'm very happy with the series. I'm very, very
Season
fortunate.
2, July? We have to wait till July.
Season 2 is June 2nd, actually.
June.
You don't have to wait for July.
For some reason, I thought it said July in my thing. But I'm just getting adjusted Netflix, so give me a break. All right. Piper Kerman, thanks so much for coming in.